the memoir that we have coming out, available for pre-release now or pre-order now, it's not a fictionalization, it's an obfuscation. We wanted, it was very hard and very important to us that we worked with CIA to create the most modern, most accurate espionage memoir available. And that was something CIA wasn't comfortable with. So it took years of back and forth. It actually culminated in we were on the brink of a First Amendment lawsuit with CIA, where we were telling them, we know our story is not classified and we know we want to release this. And there's an impetus for disclosure to the American people of this story. And CIA administratively said no. We took it to an attorney, and the CIA's attorney had a conversation, and then CIA said, we agree. You can release this story now as long as you put these obfuscation points into the story. But my point with all of that is, if people want to know how espionage actually works, if you really want to know the process of putting on an alternate personality, collecting information, identifying targets, assessing those targets for their vulnerabilities, for their motivational levers, affecting persuasion, converting that persuasion into influence, and using it all to collect foreign secrets that are then leveraged for national security benefit, it's all inside Shadow Cell. Shadow Cell being the name of our memoir. And I'm so proud that we get to tell that story, because what we did, what my wife being another CIA officer, what my wife and I did in that story is still what's happening today. And there are men and women still undercover today that you will never know, that you will never meet, that will never disclose their CIA affiliation, who are doing that job, putting themselves in the same level of risk or more than we did to protect the American people all the time. It's just like you were saying earlier, right? Our greatest successes never get brought to the light of day.
Right.
And that's what Shadow Cell is. Shadow Cell is my story, my wife and I's operation together.
She was in too.
My wife was an undercover covert clandestine officer just like me.
Wow.
And we were a tandem operating couple, and we got to execute these operations that were successful and therefore never saw the light of day.
I've gotten to talk a lot with Amaryllis Kennedy, who has, I don't know if you've ever met her.
I haven't met her, but I know her story. I know her book. Yeah.
Yeah. So former also high level operator, and we haven't gotten into the details of her operations, except for one fact that she shared is, while she was undercover, part of her cover was to start a business and be an entrepreneur. And so she created a business. I think it had something to do with tech. And she was like, I fucking hated that business. Like, it was the last thing I wanted to do, but I did it because it was part of my cover. And it was actually so successful that I ended up exiting the business. Like, it worked.
Yeah.
She was like, but fuck, did I hate that company? And it just gave me like a level of respect for her, that her like commitment to it and her actual competency was so high. Because you think, like, an entrepreneur, you got to love what you do and you got to like be all in. And she's like, no, I fucking hated that company. But I was so competent that I was able to actually execute this while undercover to such a high degree that the business was super successful nonetheless.
Yeah, it's funny. There's people don't realize that is part of the changing nature of espionage. The Cold War days of, government agencies being the undercover location for CIA officers, those days are disappearing because nobody trusts the American government. Americans don't trust the American government.
Right.
So do you think that like a Chinese person, a North Korean, a Russian, a Turk, you think they're going to look at somebody who comes from an embassy or somebody who comes from the Department of Commerce and they're going to say, oh, let's talk about secrets? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So now there's this changing of espionage operations that are geared more towards equipping operators to create, for all intents and purposes, entrepreneurial ventures. And some of them are successful and are profit generating. Some of them, most of them, are not. Right? They operate at a loss, but they can be creatively accounted for because the funding source is the black budget of the national security infrastructure.
Right.
But what's fascinating is just like with venture capital, the black budget can fund 100 operations. 80 of those operations don't make a dime. 2 of those operations break even. 8 or so of those operations go through the roof, explode, and become the funding source for tomorrow's black budget. Because that money can't come back to the United States. That money, it's dirty money for all intents and purposes. So it can't re-enter the American ecosystem. It has to go back into the black budget and be used to continue to prosecute national security priorities. So to Amaryllis's example, she was able to create a for-profit generating business that was so successful that it feeds the black budget, which feeds dozens and dozens of operations today that don't make success, that don't meet the criteria, but one or two that do, that then feed the black budget to continue going on.
Yeah.